The most important work about Kenan Rifai's life is written by Samiha Ayverdi and his friends. It's Islam in the light of Kenan Rifai and in 20th century. This was published in 1951, just 65 years ago. After that, Mustafa Tahralı has written different articles on encyclopedias, starting with Islamic Encyclopedia, and you can look them up on the internet. And after that, Ismet Binar published books including new information. One of them is The Door of the Dost, the True Friend. The other one is Those Enlighten Our World of Heart, published by Nefes publications. So I will give just brief information about Kenan Rifai's life. His grandfather was Haji Hasan Bey, who was a wealthy member of Plovdiv prominent. The neighborhood he used to live is still named after that. His father was Abdul Halim Bey and his mother was Hatice Cenan Hanım. And Kenan Rifai was born in 1867 in Thessaloniki. He spent his childhood in Plovdiv. Upon the escalation of political turmoil in the Balkans, they immigrated to Istanbul, and they bought a wooden residence in the neighborhood of Hırkayı Şerif. Kenan Rifai completed his education in Galatasaray Sultani, where he started at the age of 9. He was smart, he was wise, well-brought, but he was also a naughty child. He was loved and praised by his teachers. His mother was a lady of high spirituality who had the spiritual guidance of Edhem Shah. And Kenan Bey graduated from Galatasaray and after a short period of government employment preferred education as a professional field. He was appointed as the headmaster of Balıkesir High School when he was just 19, and he committed himself to the spiritual guidance of Edhem Shah. His mother asked him to do so. He fulfilled the requirements of his murshid as far as tasks that were given to him. He also took lessons of music and reed flute in the city. He said until he committed to Edhem Shah's guidance, he was familiarized with the art, life, and philosophy of the West, but did not have a strong connection to religion. 11 months, about a year later, he was appointed as principal of education of Adana. A short while later, principal of education of Bitola, Kosovo, Skopje, and Trabzon. He served as the principal of development in Istanbul. 2 years later, accepting the position of headmaster at Hamidi High School in Medina Munawwara in the year 1900. In Medina, Sheikhul Meshayikh Hamza Rifai, a descendant of Sayyid Ahmed al-Rifai, gave him hand and appointed him his caliph. In 1908, he established a dargah with his own means called Kenan Dargah-i Sharif. In the art of residence they had bowed, and in 1925, until 1925, he was the sheikh of this dargah, and he passed away in 1950 and buried in Merkez Efendi Mosque's yard. The title of my speech was going to be about his life and his personality. So this would be it about his life. So I'll move on with his personality. Personality is described in Kubel's dictionary, the entire characteristics of a person, both spiritual and individual. Personality is a wide concept. One can include numerous things about Kenan Rifai. I will try to expose only some of these during my presentation due to time limit. In the most important book written about him, the parable of the elephant in the Mehmet is given as an example. I think you all know that story. those who has never seen an elephant in a dark room, and they are asked to describe the elephant, and they touch different parts of the elephant and describe the elephant in different ways, and they all say correct things, but they cannot reach a holistic description of the elephant. So the descriptions about the personality of Kenan Rifai, they might be correct, but it's difficult for them to be holistic. So he would be an idealistic education, a person of music, a virtuous person, a man of letters, a man of science, and he educated important people, and he invited people to be at peace with themselves and connect to the society for afterwards. So these are all some of his attributes. As seen in the pictures, he is a good-looking, a handsome person. He had a beautiful face, and he was impressive. He wore neatly, and he had a strong voice, and he has this elegance, and he was impeccable, and he was like a world in itself, a charismatic person. The expressions of Mahir is worth attention. Abdülaziz Mecdi Efendi, speaking about him, he says, a scholar and a man of will, and he would impress the people that he would come across. Let me just give you this much, impressing the one that he meets. This attribute was visible with the famous Sheikh Kenan Bey, and it was stronger with Kenan Rifai. He had nationalistic sensitivities, and on his return to Mecca from Philippa, when the train stopped at the Turkish border, he would just bow, he would kiss the ground, and he would just hug the soldiers at duty. And at his time of education ministry, he sees Turkish troops, and the troops do not look good, and they might be just coming from a duty, and he looks at them with sadness, and he is touched with the scene, and he says, okay, they wore like this on purpose. So he wanted to save the facade. One day, when he was together with his friends, a friend of him talks about a Bulgarian cigar. The tobacco is good, the price is cheap, and he's recommended to use it, and he becomes upset. No, why would I buy Bulgarian cigarette when we have the cigarettes made by my people? You shouldn't either. I would rather use the goods of my people, even though the others are better and cheaper. I'd like to use the goods of my own people. My feeling is a special and nationalistic feeling. Otherwise, all nations are my nation. We should not forget that. We should all respect, in the first place, the nation that we belong in, and we should act accordingly. This is a permanent lesson from him. Kenan Rifai was proactive, dynamic, and successful. During his first appointment as the principal of Balıkesir High School, he notices that there were more teachers than students. The reason was he's a young headmaster. It's difficult for them to internalize. The Muslims would not send their kids to schools out of fear that they would convert to Christianity. Likewise, the Christians would not send their kids to school that they would convert to Islam. And in a short time, he gets to work and meeting different families. He would get more than 200 students to the school. During his appointment as educational administrator in Adana, he would go about all at the villages on horseback, trying to convince the public to build schools. We can say that this was his ethics can be summarized as the work ethics. He was an entrepreneur and perseverant. He would work very hard and would not feel comfortable before he would obtain the results that he desired. He would well receive obstacles that would come one after another, appreciating that these were from God, and he advises followingly. Do not stay where you are. Advance. Advance, be it very little. Otherwise, your life would not only mean getting closer to a grave. And he continues, walk, always walk. If death seizes you on your way, this is something that God would know. It should not be while you are standing still. He also was an idealist and in love with the Prophet. He went to delightfully when offered the position as headmaster in high school to be opened in Medina. Medina was within the Ottoman borders at the time, but it was very distant, hard to go and come back from Istanbul, and it was not really a place of comfort to those who were. So he gives up the prestigious position in Istanbul and goes, and this concerns some of his friends, and they get curious why he just gives up all these in Istanbul and heads for Medina. And he responds, I would go even as a servant, let alone being a headmaster. What drags him over Medina is the love of Prophet and the love of duty. He was accused perhaps with some things, and he, like any other great scholar, they're all accused of their time, and he responds to the accusations as, religious calls us agnostic, yet the atheist blames us too. We are not from them or the others, yet we are both from them and the others. Those who consider themselves religious, they do not like my religiosity. Those who has no connection to religion, they find me little too religious. They accuse me of being little too religious. I'm not what they describe. I'm not what they say, but then I have the tolerance to embrace them all, and I see them as the mirror reflections of the Creator, so I do not exclude them and I accept them. He would help in courtesy. One day, since he didn't find it proper to give money to a poor, and he collects the changes on the table, and he speaks to the poor. Let's change our money. And he takes the little amount of money from the table and he gives more than that. After giving some money to the poor he saw on the street, he says, what a huge grace that Allah should allow somebody to make a poor person happy. This is why I feel like kissing the hand that reaches out to me. Of course, this is different from professional begging. He was always giving. He offered his experience and knowledge to everyone. He gave one of his 2 coats, and he gave away again his medicine in the cupboard. From time to time, he was doing these aids silently to avoid the opposition of his entourage. So he would do it in secret. And he was never satisfied with the pleasure of giving. He was optimistic, tolerant, and generous. In the February of 1930, he meets Abdul Baki Baykara, who is the last sheikh before the tekkas were shut down. sheikh went through great depravity, and so he starts a life that he was not accustomed to. So he died a poor man. So with all the sorrow from that, he says, once we were cheering up with the reed of Maulana, now we became a whistle. And Kenan Rifai replies, why should we be whistles? We are still whatever we are. We are cheering up in the tekkah of the manifest. Now we are enjoying the tekkah of the heart. Now our skin became the tekkah and our hearts became maqams. Just like expressed by our Hoja here in 1925, the tariqas were shut down. But tasawwuf is not only consolidated by the presence of tariqas, so tasawwuf lived on in the hearts of people. He was very advanced in well manners and humility, and his disciples once described him as an exceptional person to somebody who wanted to know about Kenan Rifai. And he speaks positive sentences about him, and he sees the letter, and once he sees the positive expressions about him, woe to your efforts. If I have ever any attribute, it could be only that I am an absolute nothing. Please erase them all. Once again, he said, I'm good for nothing. I have only one thing that I can leave behind in this world. And he went on to recite, he recited the following verses. I am a vagabond full of sins. How will I dare to present myself in the hereafter? And the great master of him, Sayyid Ahmed Rifai, the humility, seeing himself as a low person is well known. So it seems that he learned that from his master very well. He was compassionate and loyal. Once the coachman of the carriage started whipping the horse, and he says, do not hit, my son, do not hit. And I feel, he says, I feel the pain on my own body. He would never want to have anybody or any creature tortured. He would caress a walnut tree that he would eat the walnuts, calling it my sultan. And he always showed embrace for people, and he supported them, and he consoled them. He was forgiving and never complaining. During his illness, when the doctors would ask him, what is your complaint, sir? The doctors ask. And even at the toughest times, he would reply, complaint? I have no complaint, alhamdulillah. It is said that Kenan Rifai always stayed a child in some aspects and never grew out of this. His biographers write about him like that. He would take shelter under this characteristic and rest when he was tested with extreme difficulties. And he would also enjoy acting like a child among the children. And he sees children of troops, and they salute him, and he starts walking with them. And so people get surprised and started watching him in surprise, and he likes this, the way they look at him. According to Samiha Ayverdi, Kenan Rifai was somebody surpassing humans in his qualities, and because of that he would be considered alone, just like many other great men, many other great scholars. The following words would be an example to this. Even one person who understands me would be sufficient. I would gladly talk to only one person if he would be only one to listen to me among the thousands out there. But even if I cannot find that one person, I would not be desperate. I would just speak to myself. Anyway, that would mean there is only one that is left out there. We know that Kenan Rifai raised a great deal of important people. Perhaps he wanted to raise more people, and we see this in his expressions. I wrote, I drew, I lectured, I opened dergahs, I played instruments, I sang with my voice, I told stories, I made you play games, I repeated the same things over and over, always asked for the same thing, yet I could not explain myself to you, I could not make my voice heard. That is a great lesson, I think. We talk mostly about his visible features. When we talked about Kenan Rifai's personality, he, in summary, is a spiritual and intangible characters. He's a whole lot of them, and I think this point is where the words end. Safiye Erol describes her teacher as mystic man, wise man, and a knowing teacher, and continues, the state of true lovers is never known. What kind of experiments do they do in their own existential labs? Do they skip out themselves? Is there something produced? If so, how will it manifest itself, and when and in what form? Answers to these questions are beyond prediction. To express the difficulty of the task, that's what she says. For example, no one will ever achieve to disclose completely the secrets of his life in Medina. Although it is hard to reach the essence of his spiritual personality, a deep analysis of his prose and poetry is perhaps necessary for this. A greater in-depth analysis should be made about his works, about his masterpieces, so we might have a partial answers to these questions. God bless him, and here I conclude my speech. Thank you very much.